Hello, Janesville, and welcome back to Park Place Views, the monthly program that aims to keep residents informed by highlighting the people, places, and partners of the City of Janesville. As always, this program is brought to you by the City of Janesville and JTV Media Services. I'm your host, Nick Faust, and I'm the Communications Specialist in the City Manager's Office. Now, in last month's episode, we sat down with Senior Center Supervisor Linda Clevin. With the center's membership drive in full swing, it was fantastic to hear about how Janesville's Action Place is showing our seniors why life really begins at 50. Now today I'm looking forward to being joined by none other than Erin Davis from the City Manager's Office. As the assistant to the City Manager, Erin oversees the Manager's Initiatives Group, which includes supervising my role in strategic communications and the city's strategic planning and decision-making efforts. I'm very excited to have Erin stop by the program to help our viewers better understand her unique position in the Manager's Office. But first, a little bit more about Assistant to the City Manager Davis. Erin took her role in the City Manager's Office in March of 2021. Before this, she had been the director of Janesville Mobilizing for Change, also known as JM4C, since 2017, and was the former manager of the House of Mercy Homeless Shelter, where she worked for 12 years. Erin has a bachelor's degree in Human and Social Services Administration and a master's in Public Administration. She's also currently serving as the board chair at Community Action, Inc. Thanks for joining us today, Erin.
Hey, Nick. How's it going?
Oh, well, Erin, it is going well, and better now that we got you in the studio. And before we get started, I know I quickly did a laundry list of accolades and professional experience, but I thought I'd maybe give you the chance to tell our viewers a bit more about yourself.
Sure. So as you said, my name is Erin Davis. I've lived in the city of Janesville since I was 4.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Long time. We won't get into how long that is.
Good.
But yeah, so I really enjoy living in the city of Janesville. I came to the city, municipal government as the director of Janesville Mobilizing for Change. And as you mentioned before that, I'd been at the shelter. I started there as a volunteer when I was still in high school and just loved the place so much that I decided to stay. And when I was ready to spread my wings, the city seemed a perfect place to land.
Yeah. So a tenured history, not only in Janesville, but in public nonprofit administration. And as I had said, Erin, your role is a bit unique, and perhaps the naming convention is one viewers might not be familiar with. Are you able to give us a bit of a 10,000-foot view of what the assistant to the city manager position entails?
Sure. First of all, not to be confused with deputy city manager.
Right.
Right? So I think that's where people get the most confused, right? Because you hear assistant too. So as you mentioned, I'm really involved in strategic planning. I'm really involved in the agenda process. So all of the materials that go before the council, I've reviewed them all, made sure that they're good to go, everybody can understand them. And then also our capital improvement program. At this time of year, that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Volunteer recruitment. So our boards, commissions, and committees really support the municipality and our council, and I help make sure that they get filled with people from the community.
Yeah. So a jack of many trades when it comes to all the special projects and things like the CIP or the strat plan, quite large programs that affect every city department. And you mentioned the strategic planning process, Erin. What did those efforts look like in a given year?
So the strategic planning process, it's not just me. It involves all of the division, department, and office heads throughout the city. And what they do is they'll put their ideas on paper, and specifically in a database for the coming years. And we look out 5 years in advance. We're not just focused on what comes, immediately next, but we want to know, what are the steps to get to whatever goal it is that we have that is far-reaching. And then we start, making those plans. How much will it cost? Is it really feasible to do this in 2023, or is it something that we have to look at in 2024 or 25 based on financial constraints? And how much will it benefit the citizens of the community? Then once we have, all of our ideas down, we go through them as a group. I package it, make it look pretty, and then we send it on to the council to approve for us.
Yeah. So an annual process, year end to year end, really. It takes a lot to get that pulled together, and I think that's important to highlight because when people think about, the planning process, it's important to know that the city is taking that 5-year approach that is really incremental and detailed in progress and how we do things. And I think as evidenced by that, Aaron, this year, or I should say in December into January, we have a new strategic goal that came online here
Yes.
for the city, and that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Could you tell us more about the new ninth strategic goal?
Yeah, so when we decided to adopt diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it was actually part of two conversations, right? We had a goal called Rock River Corridor that we'd had on the plan for a really long time. And we had, gone through most of the items that were in that goal. We accomplished a lot. The Rock River Corridor is really looking great.
Yeah.
And the items that remained really belonged in other goals,
Yeah.
right? We could move them. And so we had this opening, and we had a DEIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging committee that was working, within the government. And we decided that this would be a really great way to not only highlight the efforts that the committee is making, but also to make it part of the city's fabric.
Yeah.
That we really want those diversity, equity, inclusion tasks to be brought to the forefront
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah, and I think not only does that highlight again the living nature of the strategic plan, right? We've accomplished, and if you take a walk around the rock, you can see that we've accomplished a lot of those goals, and some of those other goals that still remain really do dovetail well into other areas, and so I think that is a testimony to the fact that we are constantly refreshing and looking at that. And then when we think about diversity DEIB goals, just seeing how that impacts, like you said, the fabric of the organization, every department, division, and office, and what that impact is on the future. I
Right.
mean, thinking about performance culture, safe and healthy communities, which are other strategic goals, DEIB really works hand in hand with those. And so I think it's fantastic to hear that we've done that, and the DEIB committee's efforts are now really a part of the city's efforts.
Yeah, it's really an awesome goal that we have, and I was really glad to see it made into a goal, and not just as individual plans within different goals,
Yeah.
because it's so important,
Right.
as you said. So
Right. Yeah. Comprehensive approach. Love it. And thinking about that and just all of the strategic plan tasks that you talk about, how does the city then track our progress in each of those areas?
all right, so last year we had 236 strategic
Wow.
tasks just for 2022. And I mean, keep in mind that this is across several departments, divisions, and offices. It's a lot. We have this great database that was created for us by the city systems analyst. And what people can do is they can go into the system, and I say can, I mean that they have to,
Yeah.
at least twice a year, and update their tasks with, have they accomplished it for this year?
Right.
So at the end of the year, I'm able to run a report that tells me in 2022, we completed 81% of the tasks that
Wow.
we assigned to ourselves.
Yeah. That level of detail. I mean,
Yes.
that is, I don't think people perhaps appreciate that we really track those metrics like that. The strat plan isn't something that is beautiful looking on a shelf, and those are just things we think about. This is actually day to day. We are tracking those tasks and making sure we accomplish them.
Well, and I think that's kind of the beauty of my position,
Yeah.
right? Is that there's someone that is dedicated
Right.
to making some noise to make sure that the strategic plan doesn't get forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. You get those outputs, get those outcomes, and that is great to have someone dedicated to making sure that happens. You briefly kind of touch on the database that also incorporates the capital improvement plan. What is the capital improvement plan, perhaps, for folks that don't know?
So the capital improvement plan, think capital projects, building projects, things that depreciate in value, one-time purchases that may be large.
Right.
So when we have to buy new dump trucks, new fire trucks, maybe we're making building renovations.
Yeah.
So this coming council meeting, the council is going to look at renovations to City Services Center, which is in need of some help after being used for many years. These are all items that would fit into our capital improvement plan.
Yeah.
We look at having, a certain amount of money each year that we borrow for. and we borrow across several different categories. So if you look at the plan itself, it looks like we might be in the neighborhood of, and I'm just going to throw out a number that we're looking at for this year, of about 40 million in borrowing for the capital improvement plan. Now, 30 million of that is actually going to be coming from water, wastewater, sanitation, stormwater, these different funds that, you know, they sort of pay for themselves through
Yeah.
fees. $10 million approximately is what we borrow for our general fund. And what I do there is every year I sit down with the finance director, the city manager, and we look at what can we afford, how can we afford it, is this something that needs to be split into several years?
Yeah.
And also, how do we prioritize those competing interests, right? Because we have the street program, it's very important, but we also have, you know, Palmer Park, for example, you know, maybe, and this isn't the case, but say the playground equipment needs to be replaced. That's also very important.
Yeah.
So how do we do both?
Yeah. And I mean, that's certainly something I think you can take a step back and appreciate too, because we're talking tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars when you think about all the facilities and assets that we would consider capital that needs to be budgeted for in that way. And without something like a CIP, I think it's easy to see where that stuff just doesn't get tracked across a big organization. I mean, such a diverse and large organization. Somebody like you needs to be there to kind of bring that all together and, you know, keep all things seen when it comes to planning for that.
Yes, and sometimes act as appetite suppressant.
Yeah, I'm sure we've got a lot of great departments that have a lot of great projects.
Yes.
And in a perfect world, we would do them all, but you help give that long-range vision to what and when
Yes.
we can get stuff done. And you briefly touched about something we actually designed in-house, system analyst Hai Chen Dong, a CIP strat plan combined database. What does that software kind of do, and how does that improve performance?
All right, so I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Yes.
Of course, it's part of my job, so
Right.
I would. You can go in and you can actually create your tasks within the strategic plan database, and then from there you can link to the capital improvement program. You know, enter all of the costs, all the funding sources for the cost, and then even a description of what the project is.
Yeah.
If we get super savvy, we can start adding pictures.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I like that feature.
Yes.
Also, you know, some of the other really neat features is that we can do our task updates. So, you know, mid-year, end of the year, we can see how are we doing in terms of our strategic goal. What do we have left that we need to focus on? And then the reporting. And the reporting at the end of the day is probably the most important piece for me.
Right.
Because it gives me, you know, the reports I need for the CIP in terms of spreadsheets. They can show it to me in a couple of different ways so that it works for our finance office, but then also for somebody who wants to see, you know, how are we prioritizing. I can see the strategic plan reports. I can break it down by just department. So if I want to see, you know, what are my strategic items for the year, I can look at just me.
Yeah. What a powerful, I mean, that's just a data tool. Talk about the depth of data something like that really lets us harness. Because you talk about, again, two plans, I mean, massive plans that have tons of moving parts. This database takes it end to end, allows you to run those reports and comprehensively look at those things. Whereas, you know, if something's not talking through the whole process in one software, I mean, you would be pulling from here, there, trying to bring everything together. And that was a tool made in-house.
Yes.
I want to highlight that again. That's not something the city purchased. That is something that we had, again, system analyst Hai Chen Dong, who works in our IT office, had that ability and foresight to innovate and make something like that. And I think that leads me to my next point, but I understand that statewide now, we are sharing that tool with other local governments who are interested in doing it the Janesville way.
That's right. So last year we held a webinar with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and we talked to multiple municipalities that day, local governments. There must have been at least 30 that were on the line.
Yeah.
And then the video was made available, once we were done. And, when all was said and done, we had more than 13 communities reach out to us
Wow.
to ask for the bare bones, basically, of the database that they could use and implement their own.
Yeah, that's so cool. That is city innovation on our end, and just a great idea. We made it work. We showed that it worked, and it's being shared now with, like you said, municipalities across the state who are interested in doing it the Janesville way, and that's really a testimony, if nothing else, to the efficacy. So that is so cool, and what a neat chance to get on a webinar for you and get to talking strat plan CIP with folks. I bet.
Yeah, it was quite fun.
Yeah. Outside of, I think, tracking progress through the database and things like that, I wanted to maybe highlight some other sort of performance measurement efforts you oversee, and perhaps ones that are more available to the public.
Sure. So you're speaking of Park Place Performs.
Oh.
Park Place Performs is a system that sort of sits on our website. We link to it. You can go there and you can see all of the different strategic goals that we have, and also how we're measuring those goals, how we're holding ourselves accountable. Not just in the simple task, but this is how it's improved.
Yeah.
So a really great example of this is our streets program, right? So we have the street rehabilitation. It's got multiple different things within it that, at the end of the day, probably doesn't matter a whole lot to the system.
Yeah.
What matters to them is how good are their roads.
Right.
Right? So the Public Works Department uses something called a PACER rating. And as our PACER rating increases, that's how we know we're improving the streets that we have. So you can go into Park Place Performs. It's interactive. You can find the actual data, see it for years back, and you can see what was the average PACER rating of the roads in 2013 and what is it now.
Yeah.
And being able to view that data will tell you how we're meeting our goals.
Yeah. And totally available to the public, like you
Yes.
said, and it gives you that time series look into tangible outcomes and outputs that the city is producing. I mean, something like the PACER rating system and our roadway conditions are of great public interest. Citizens give it to us all the time about stuff like that, and they can take sort of the power in their own hands. Go to that website, which will be displayed, of course, /Park Place Performs on your screen there. And they can take a look and get up-to-date information about the progress the city's making on stuff like that. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and since it's still brand new, we don't have DEIB
Yes.
up on the platform yet. We're still showing Rock River Corridor, but as we get those outcomes put together that we want to see, we'll start loading that onto the dashboard.
Right, start to see some of the successes in that new goal that we start to make this year and years to come. That's awesome. And Erin, as assistant to the city manager, you also, as you mentioned in your intro, kind of oversee a committee appointment process. First, what is the role, I think, of boards, committees, and commissions in our local government?
Some of the boards, committees, and commissions actually have the power to recommend various codes, perhaps. The Plan Commission has the power to recommend to the council, changes to how, things are zoned.
Yeah.
Really, the way they act is as an advisory
Yeah.
to our city council. In the case of the Library Board of Trustees, they act as the overseer of the library.
Yeah.
And all of them are equally important, in their various ways. We have a total of 13 different boards, commissions, and committees. I won't list them all for you, but the ones that I think people hear about the most are Plan Commission, Police and Fire,
Yeah.
Advisory Committee. I'm sorry, not that one. People don't usually hear about Advisory Committee on appointments, but the Alcohol License Advisory Committee.
Right.
And all of them are staffed mostly by citizen volunteers.
Wow. Yeah, and so it takes, engaged citizens to really staff up
Yes.
those boards, committees, and commissions. And And like you said, some of our great boards, committees, and commissions are advisory, but some, and perhaps folks know the ones that you just listed, are imbued with some legal authority under
Yeah.
state statute that make them incredibly important. And when you think about just, again, the diverse, large scale of our government, all the different subject matters that the city organization touches, those citizens engaged on those boards really make a difference in bridging the knowledge gap and keeping our council informed about important issues.
Yeah, so the Historic Commission has the ability to, tell residents owning historic homes
Yeah,
how they can rehab their homes.
right.
The Alcohol License Advisory Committee has the ability to, grant certain licenses.
Yeah,
Some of them have to go on for council approval, but certainly they have the ability to grant some of them. Like, for example, a temporary Class B license,
yeah.
you know.
Lots
so-
of authority. I mean, that's a
Yes.
lot of authority, and that's volunteer
Mhm.
residents who are active and engaged. And we touched on some of the residency rules here. Are there rules for who can be on committees, and how does the appointment process that you help oversee, how does that work?
So as for who can serve, it really depends on the committee itself. So, for example, the Advisory Committee on Appointments, which I'm the liaison to, you must be a resident of the city of Janesville.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have other committees where you don't have to be a resident. They like to see community involvement. For example, the Library Board of Trustees, you do not have to be a resident.
Right.
They have a certain number of positions that are available to people outside of the city of Janesville. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily filled by
Yeah.
people who don't live in Janesville. So if you want to see a full listing of who can serve on what board, that is available on our website in the volunteer section. And what happens is each year in February, so right now,
Yeah.
we open up the volunteer recruitment process. And we do have an annual process. However, you can actually sign up to volunteer at any part of the year.
Right.
And your name will be held in reserve for if we have people that need to step down for whatever reason. But at the end of that recruitment period, the Advisory Committee on Appointments will get together, and for those committees that they, make recommendations for, they'll look through all the applications and say, we think that these people would be great
Yeah.
for this specific board. And people have the ability of choice,
Yeah.
right? So when they're signing up, they choose which ones they want to be considered for. And then in April, the council will confirm those final appointments, and new members will begin in May. And then, as I said, throughout the rest of the year, if people need to step down for whatever reason, we can go back to that list of volunteers that we've collected and anybody else who signs up to see who could fill that spot.
Right. Right. So that's another quite hefty endeavor.
It is.
To really sort of manage on your end, and a lot of inputs in terms of recruiting citizens, engaging them, and then getting them to the right boards, committees, and commissions, working with the advisory folks on getting them slotted in. And as you mentioned, first part of this month in March here, that will wrap up. And those folks will then begin their service in the year to come.
Yes.
Wow.
It's very exciting. And,
Yeah.
I think if I had one more thing that I wanted to say about it, I would say that we appreciate everybody who signs up.
Yeah.
And every year we're blessed to have more volunteers than positions open.
Right.
And so it's always hard to say no to people who, we didn't have a spot for,
Yeah.
but we really appreciate them.
Yeah. Incredibly thankful. As we kind of really highlighted here, their service is invaluable in advising the council, making important decisions. Without those citizen volunteers, we wouldn't have that, and the city's performance would suffer.
Right.
And our community would be less well off. So thank you to those folks, and thank you to everybody who applied to that. Now, I want to shift gears a bit, Aaron, and really highlight a project that I thought was super cool. We talk about how you do serve as sort of a special projects manager in your role, and this past year, into this year now, you've oversaw, I should say, the Pay It Forward grant program, in which you helped award $2 million in federal ARPA funds the city received to some local nonprofits who are making a difference right here in Janesville for our residents. I know a lot of those groups are busy kind of now in the stage of putting, they put pen to paper, now they're putting that money to use. Could you give us an overview of that really neat program?
Yeah, so that was awesome. And again, I used volunteers for this program. I collected to the group, it was a council member, 3 individuals from outside of the city of Janesville. Working in different endeavors, and then also several staff from the city of Janesville, trying to get a really diverse representation so that when we made our decision, it would really reflect what the community needed. And we received so many applications
Yeah.
and for so much money that it was really a difficult process to choose.
Right.
How are we going to award these funds, and how do we award them in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
Everybody could get some small piece of the pie, but then there were certain projects and most of the projects wouldn't happen
Yeah.
without a larger slice. And so in the end, we settled on projects such as Aptiv. We had CISA 2, we had Boys and Girls Club, and I'm not going to get through all of them,
Right.
but they're all amazing projects, and they're working on fixing of facilities. They're purchasing vehicles to help run their programs. In some cases, they're building homes
Yeah.
for people that are in need of homes.
That's awesome. Real world, that's
Yes.
impact. I mean, that is a program, like you said, no shortage of worthy community groups and nonprofits in Janesville that are making a difference. But to be able to make some of those big capital projects happen for those groups
Yes.
and those big initiatives, and then to see that, I know I had the opportunity to visit CISA, as you mentioned, who purchased a handy able van for their clients, and that is just, I mean, it was such a cool moment. I think so much in government is you do get to see some stuff, come to the table, come to fruition, but I think seldom do you get to see such a tangible, achievement.
Yes.
And seeing those kids get on that active van was really cool. And so that's just an awesome program, and I think a really cool thing to highlight.
Right, because these are just people who, like you and I, want a way to get to various activities that they have.
Yeah.
Make it to necessary appointments, and the city of Janesville is able to help with that.
Yeah. And you and your group of volunteers made that happen, and so super cool. Props to you for that, and always love to highlight that kind of special project.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, and another thing that I think was a lot of fun, hopefully for you, is in the fall, Gordy LaChance, our former IT manager, retired after many decades of service to the community, and that left us with a bit of an interim opening in our IT office. And you actually just finished filling that role. And I kind of want to highlight this because it's certainly, as I know, not your first foray into managing staff, but it is in the world of IT. And so I thought it would be interesting to maybe say, what did you take away from that experience, and what is the world of municipal IT like?
So I think a really big takeaway is that there is no shortage of IT projects out there.
Right.
Right? There are so many things to learn, and so many different little niches, I suppose, into IT. You've got everything from closed captioning to artificial intelligence to, hey, my computer won't turn on today, and I can't figure that out. Now, as I was down there, as you said, that I have a background in management, but not in IT.
Right.
They taught me some stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just got really lucky. Like the computer thought that I was from IT, and
Yes.
it would start working.
It respected the role,
Yeah. And those were my favorite. I'd walk away feeling like I did something good that day.
Right.
But there really are a lot of pieces that have to come together
Yeah.
in order to make our government systems as effective as we can. And then there is the issue of government security.
Right.
Right. It is very important that we keep our systems secure so that we can continue to function as a local government and as the local government that the people of Janesville need.
Right, right, which is one that, as you said, protects the sort of information that if you think a local government has, I mean, that's quite important, quite private, and imperative that for the function of the city, when we talk about operations, things like our water plants,
Yes.
our wastewater facility, things that run on IT, we have to keep those safeguarded from cyber threats, which in the 21st century is really one of the most perilous things facing a municipal government.
Absolutely. And there is hardly a thing within the city that is not affected by our IT infrastructure. And so making sure that we're keeping that up to date, safe, secure,
Yeah.
it is imperative.
And it will only get more important as we move forward in the cyber age. And I'm glad you can help from everything to, like I said, SCADA systems out at the wastewater to me spilling Diet Coke on my keyboard. I'm going to come to you now moving forward. So that sounds like got some good experience.
Well, here's what I'll say. I did memorize the phone numbers down in IT.
That's, yeah.
So when you come to me,
You'll be able to phone one of our proficient, dedicated staff down there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow, that's good to hear. Aaron, you're also the city liaison, again, special projects sort of world, so to speak, to the Bird e-scooter program, which I think is of a bit of community interest. I know that topic recently returned to the council's agenda. Where are we with Bird? Where are we with e-scooters moving into the warmer months?
So the city and Bird are in negotiations for the 2023 Memorandum of Understanding.
Awesome.
At the last city council meeting, the city council did indicate their approval for an MOU, which is exciting because MOUs will allow us the flexibility to make changes and modifications as we move forward, with the idea that in the future there may be some sort of ordinance
Yeah.
that will, really solidify how we have these partnerships. So my goal is that, by March, hopefully we'll have a signed MOU and we'll see Bird e-scooters maybe coming back mid-April, beginning of May. Snow has to be off the ground. It has
Yes,
to be
it does.
safe. And unfortunately, we've had several false springs so far.
Yes. Yeah. The winter has been a false spring in a
Yes.
way, yeah.
Yes, it has. And that people will begin to enjoy them again.
Yeah.
Very
yeah.
soon.
That's, I mean, what an interesting kind of cool, I mean, I had only seen those, larger cities, Chicago, Milwaukee. But to see that program kind of come to Janesville, to see Bird, be proactive in wanting to work with the city, which I
Yes.
think is always important to highlight because they did not, nothing by ordinance forced them to really work with us. And then to see staff, you, yourself, and the council kind of work through hiccups and maybe kind of get us to a place where we can see that program return, I think is a really cool
Yeah,
A to B.
it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen in 23.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, looking forward, I think that about does it for us today, Aaron. But before we leave, looking maybe the year ahead, 5 years ahead, getting in our strategic planning mindset, I wanted to ask what you are most excited about in the world of the Managers Initiatives Group.
So I think some of the things that I'm most excited about is how are we going to continue to reach the people of the city, right? You're obviously very familiar with this because you work in it every day.
Yeah.
But the landscape that we use to communicate with people, it's changing.
Yes.
And we need to change with it. And so I really look forward to seeing the ideas that you have and seeing the various ideas that, we might research and making use of them.
Yeah, we are a responsive municipal government, but as you mentioned, 2023, think about the volume of change we've had not only in the last 5 years, last 20 years in how governments communicate with residents. I mean, it is just night and day difference, and it's constantly changing. And so I'm very grateful to have a supervisor in your role that values that, and I'm excited to see what we will do in the years to come.
Well, you're pretty easy to supervise.
Ah,
Nick.
thank you, Aaron. That's why I had you on the show. That was
I know.
actually it. we can wrap now. But I do appreciate you joining today, Aaron, taking time to stop in and give our residents kind of an inside look into what your role is in the manager's office. I know I certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with you every day, and it was awesome to kind of highlight the great work that you're doing on the program, so thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
And I want to thank you, our viewers and residents, for tuning in today and for all you do to help make Janesville a community of choice to realize life's opportunities. I invite you to stay connected with the city by following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, signing up for emergency notifications from the JPD via the Nixle app, and registering to receive our weekly city press releases by visiting www.janesvillewi.gov/email list. For Park Place Views in the City of Janesville, I'm Nick Faust. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next month.